For those of you that have not been closely paying attention to the news, over the weekend there was a military strike against the Houthis in Yemen. It is part of the ongoing Yemeni civil war, a Saudi proxy war. President Donald Trump authorized a military strike. And now we have learned more and more about the background. This is an ongoing story, and it gets more and more suspicious and urgent the deeper we dive into it. We have new signal text messages from The Atlantic. And of course, the big story is, how did the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic magazine, the anti-Trump, hoax-peddling Atlantic magazine, how did he end up in a very private discussion with the Secretary of Defense, with the Director of National Intelligence? How did that happen? Well, first, I want to read all the new text messages that we have. I want to read all of them piece by piece, and you can be the judge of whether or not this is war plans, attack plans. So this is from Pete Hegseth. These are some new signal messages. Team update. Time now, 11:44 Eastern. Weather is favorable. Just confirmed with CENTCOM. We are a go for mission launch. 12:15 Eastern. F-18s launch. First strike package. 13:45 trigger-based F-18 first strike window starts. Target terrorist is at his known location, so should be on time. Also, strike drones launch. Now, let me just pause. I'm going to say the obvious, that Jeffrey Goldberg being involved in this group chat, seeing this, had a little bit of a heads up that a military strike was going to happen. Thankfully, this could have been a lot worse. That it could have been somebody that would have live tweeted and potentially thwarted a military operation. Thankfully, that did not happen. 14:10, more F-18s launch, second strike package. 14:15, strike drones on target. This is when the first bombs will definitely drop, pending earlier trigger-based targets. 15:36, F-18 second strike starts. Also, first, and that message cuts off. Michael Waltz writes in the group chat, he continues, team, you should have a statement of conclusions with taskings per the president's guidance this morning in your high side inboxes. State and DOD, we developed suggested notification lists for regional allies and partners. Joint staff is sending this AM a more specific sequence of events in the coming days, and we will work with DOD to ensure Chief of Staff, the Office of the Vice President, and POTUS are briefed. J.D. Vance responds here. Team, I am out for the day doing an economic event in Michigan, but I think we are making a mistake. 3% of U.S. trade runs through the Suez. 40% of the European trade does. This is a real risk that the public doesn't understand this or why it's necessary. The strongest reason to do this, as POTUS said, is to send a message. But I'm not sure the president is aware how inconsistent this is with the message on Europe right now. There's a further risk that we see a moderate to severe spike in oil prices. I'm willing to support the consensus of the team and keep these concerns to myself. But there's a strong argument for delaying this a month, doing the messaging work on why this matters, seeing where the economy is, etc. Pete Hegseth responds, but we can easily pause, and if we do, I will do all we can to enforce 100% OPSEC, operational security. I welcome other thoughts. Michael Waltz responds to J.D. Vance and says, the trade figures we have are 15% of global and 30% of container. It's difficult to break down to the United States specifically because much of the container either going through the Red Sea still or around the Cape of Good Hope are components going to Europe that turns into manufactured goods for transatlantic trade to the United States. Whether we pull the plug or not today, European navies do not have the capability to defend against the types of sophisticated anti-ship cruise missiles and drones the Houthis are now using. So whether it's now or several weeks from now, it'll have to be the United States that reopens these shipping lanes. Per the president's request, we are working with DOD and state to determine how to compile the costs associated and levy them on the Europeans. Michael Waltz then added Stephen Miller to the chat. Very important. We only have evidence of Michael Waltz adding people to the chat. As we stated in the first PC, we have a fundamental decision of allowing the sea lanes to remain closed or to reopen them now or later. We are the only ones with capability, unfortunately. From a messaging standpoint, we absolutely add this to the horribles on why the Europeans must invest in their own defense. The last of the chat that we have from The Atlantic continues. From Joe Kent, there's nothing time-sensitive driving this timeline. We'll have the exact same options in a month. The Israelis will likely take strikes and therefore ask us for more support to replenish whatever they use against the Houthis, but that's a minor factor. I will send you the unclassified data we pulled on BAM shipping. John Ratcliffe then chimes in, from the CIA perspective, we are mobilizing assets to support now, but a delay would not negatively impact us or additional time would be used to identify better starting points for coverage on Houthis leadership. Pete Hegseth says, quote, Vice President JD, I understand your concerns and fully support you raising with POTUS important considerations, most of which are tough to know how they play out: economy, Ukraine, peace, Gaza, etc. I think messaging is going to be tough no matter what. No matter who knows, nobody knows who the Houthis are, which is why we would need to stay focused on Biden failed and Iran funded. Waiting a few weeks or a month does not fundamentally change the calculus. Two immediate risks on waiting. One, this leaks and we look indecisive. Two, Israel takes action first, or Gaza ceasefire falls apart, and we don't get to start this on our own terms. We can manage both. We are prepared to execute, and if I had a final go or no-go vote, I believe we should. This is not about the Houthis. I see it as two things: restoring freedom of navigation, a core national interest, and reestablishing deterrence, which Biden cratered. Okay, that is the latest messages out of the Atlantic. The Atlantic never should have had eyes on this. And we are still trying to figure out exactly how on earth this occurred. And I want to reiterate what I said yesterday on the program. Behind the curtain, we see a robust, open debate. We see that J.D. Vance is actually America first behind closed doors as he is in public. That is refreshing. That is authentic. That is a good thing to see. But it does leave us with a more fundamental question. How did this, because now this is the number one news story in the country. The Democrats are pouncing. They're doing everything they possibly can. And it could have been a heck of a lot worse. This could have been really, really bad. How did Jeffrey Goldberg get added to a private government signal chat? Well, here is what we know. We know that Mike Waltz was the admin of the group chat. Now, for example, I text a lot of people on Signal. I use Signal a lot. The thing about Signal is that when you text somebody, so for example, let's just say my wife, if I were to put E into my Signal group or Signal new message, she is the first contact. Why? Because I message her a lot on Signal. Or for example, if I want to message another one of my friends that I message on Signal, let's say Mike Davis, who I message a lot on Signal. Mike Davis comes up as the first contact, meaning when you type in a letter, whether it be J for Jeffrey Goldberg, you had to have had established contact with that person in order for that contact to come up first. In order for this to have been a mistake that Mike Waltz made, he would have to have a lot of contact with Jeffrey Goldberg. Enough so much that it populated as the first contact to be added on Signal. And Mike Waltz is the admin of this chat. We're going to play a piece of tape, though, because either Mike Waltz is completely lying or Signal is compromised. Those are the only two options. Either Mike Waltz denies knowing him, says I never talked to him, or Signal is compromised by the Central Intelligence Agency, and of all people, they gave the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic access. Those are the only two options available. Joining us now is Speaker Newt Gingrich. Mr. Speaker, thank you for taking the time. Mr. Speaker, how are you processing and thinking about this Signal story and the strange and bizarre development that the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic found himself in a private military group chat, Mr. Speaker?
Well, I mean, I think there are two different parts to that. One is, you said it just right, the strange and bizarre fact that of all the people who might have ended up in there, one of the most anti-Trump journalists from an anti-Trump magazine happened to be the guy there. I think that's so weird, you wouldn't have put it into a novel. The other fact is, they probably shouldn't have those kind of discussions on Signal. When I was Speaker, we routinely used the most powerful security systems. We had somebody who would come to me, wherever I was, carrying a secure phone so I could talk to the president on a line that the Chinese and the Russians couldn't possibly hack. So at one level, I would say there's an underlying lesson here that's important, and that is that they need to tighten up their own security provisions, just in general, not because of the Atlantic Monthly, but because of the Chinese and the Russians and the North Koreans, all of whom are very good at hacking into things. The other is, my advice to them is just get it over with. This is not an issue that helps Donald Trump at all to sit around and wallow in it. A mistake was made. We don't fully know why the mistake was made. The best thing they can say is, we're looking into it, and when we understand it, we'll report to you. But until then, we have nothing more to say, and just move on. What the left loves, they found something where they can pick at the Trump team and pick at the Trump team, and people will have different answers because they have different memories. They come from different places, and then each contradiction will become its own story. And the left would like to do nothing more than hide from the underlying realities of what Trump is doing to fundamentally get America back on track. And if they can find some story, any story, that lets them avoid covering the successful things, they're going to go there. So the best thing that the Trump team can do, in my judgment, is just shut up. Say, we understand it was a mistake. Clearly it was a mistake. We have an investigation underway. And when we know enough, we will report to you. But until then, we have nothing more to say. And just move on.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I do think, though, that privately there needs to be some understanding of how he ended up in this group chat. Either,
well, I mean, there should be a real investigation.
Yes.
Okay. They should assign somebody competent with whatever team they need to find out, one, why were they using Signal? Two, who put the chat together? Three, how did this particular person end up on the chat? And four, why did they have a procedure which didn't surface this person the minute they were on the chat? And all those things need to be done. But I think that's clearly important for the country and for the next 3.5 years of the Trump administration. But there's no point in trying to do that out in public until you know something. And frankly, it should be real. It should be serious. They shouldn't just cover it up. They should methodically, seriously understand what happened, share with the American people what they're going to do to fix it in the future, and move on. But wallowing in it and getting involved in who said what to who, and did you really put it on? Did your staff person put it on? How did it get there? That kind of stuff the media loves. It gives them something to talk about that doesn't help Trump. But first of all, the average American will get tired of it pretty quickly. And I think the things that Trump is doing and the things that the House and Senate Republicans are doing are so big, so historic, that we want to get back to communicating those.
So I completely agree. And this is probably the first hiccup or glitch of what has been a flawless 2 months.
That's right.
Speak about that, because the president is best on offense, not taking the terms of the media.
Right. And Trump understands this instinctively. That's why I said it was a glitch. And he was going back on offense. And then, unfortunately, several of his team went up and testified in the Hill and didn't quite have their act together. And I think that's where you want to have a single sentence or 2-sentence answer that basically explains why you're not explaining until you know what you're going to say, which they clearly don't currently know. But I mean, Trump has had an astonishing run. From everything we're seeing right now, he's likely to continue to have an astonishing run. And you look just at what they've done on the border. I mean, in my wildest days, I would never have thought you could control the border that quickly. And it was just literally overnight. Everything Biden had done collapsed. People around the world figured out they're not going to get in. Illegal immigration has literally collapsed. The amount of investments being announced in the United States are breathtaking. So you have a lot of good things happening. And frankly, the fight over the shape and structure of the federal bureaucracy is a fight that people know we have to have. In our project that you know about, Charlie, the America's New Majority Project, our polling last month indicated that 82% of the country think that Washington is corrupt, and they think that it makes it harder to solve things because it's corrupt. So if the president will go out there and be the advocate of honest, clear reform, and if that's the basic theme that Elon Musk and Doge take, they're going to have huge popular support for fixing this thing. And people are going to accept that there's going to be some turmoil, there's going to be some confusion, but that on balance, it's really a good.
So if Mike Waltz is to be believed, which is obviously conceivable, then Signal has been compromised. Again, I think that's an unlikely scenario, but it's possible. I mean, it was loaded on government devices. There has been chatter for years in the intel community. There's been long rumored that Signal has to have intelligent links to the CIA and so on. Every tech has a backdoor. Again, we are in a binary. Either Signal has been compromised by the CIA, which is totally possible, or Mike Waltz is lying. These are tough clips to watch. These are flat out denials. This makes it a bigger story. Now, it is possible. I give this a low probability. It is possible that we could be looking at a Russiagate 2.0. It's very possible. I still give that a low probability, but we could be seeing a serious intel scandal here. And you think about it, Trump has had a good couple months. They're trying to slow down the administration. What is a perfect way to find yourself to be able to view war plans? Well, a group chat. You don't recognize every number. How did you get added? But there's still a lot that doesn't make sense. Why would you then add the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic? On the other side, he is kind of an intel guy. He's a super neocon. I'm still going with the more plausible explanation. What is that? Occam's razor, where the boring explanation is almost always correct. That's Occam's razor. I tend to yield towards that, which is that somebody added him that did not mean to add him. And the admin of the chat was Mike Waltz. Let's go through these pieces of tape. This is 228. Mike Waltz saying, never met Goldberg, couldn't pick him out of a police lineup. That's quite a statement. Play cut 228.
But you've never met Goldberg. He's out there saying you guys have met in the past, but you've never met him.
No idea. Wouldn't know him if I bumped into him, if I saw him in a police lineup. Do now. Knew him by reputation about lying about the president over and over again. What I can tell you for certain, certainly wasn't reaching out or talking to him at all. Why would I?
So this doesn't need to be done publicly, but this is very simple. The president or anybody in the president's team should say, okay, Mike, give me your phone right now. Give me your device. You could solve this whole thing in like 20 seconds. Give me your device. Go to Signal and see if Jeffrey Goldberg is a contact. It's so simple. If Jeffrey Goldberg is not a contact, Mike Waltz could have deleted it, but then all of a sudden you have a real issue. All of a sudden you have a deeper intel operation that's going on here. And understand, you could look at his call log. You could see, has he called him? If Mike Waltz doesn't have any contact with Jeffrey Goldberg in his phone, if you assume control of it, now you have potentially the intel agencies that Ratcliffe is supposed to be overseeing right now, creating a backdoor into private government communications and then giving the Atlantic that information. I still give that a very low probability. This is 229. Mike Waltz saying he spoke to Elon and said tech experts are going to figure this out. 229.
We're going to get to the bottom of it. I just talked to Elon on the way here. We've got the best technical minds looking at how this happened. But I can tell you for 100%, I don't know this guy. I know him by his horrible reputation, and he really is the bottom scum of journalists. And I know him in the sense that he hates the president, but I don't text him. He wasn't on my phone.
That's a flat out denial. Again, we are living in one of two scenarios. Mike Waltz is lying, or the intel community got a backdoor into Signal. It's 2:30. Mike Waltz says he put the group chat together and then suggests that they are looking to see if Jeffrey Goldberg somehow hacked into his phone and replaced the contact labeled JG with his own number. Jeffrey Goldberg would not have done this. This would be an intel operation. Play cut 230.
I built the group my job is to make sure everything's coordinated.
But how did the number? I mean, I don't mean to be pedantic here, but how did the number?
Have you ever had somebody's contact that shows their name and then you have somebody else's number there?
I never make those mistakes.
Right? You got somebody else's number on someone else's contact. So of course I didn't see this loser in the group. It looked like someone else. Now whether he did it deliberately or it happened in some other technical mean is something we're trying to figure out.
I'll be honest, this is a weird thing to lie about. Sean, welcome to the program. Sean, what is your take on this entire Signal chat story? I use Signal a lot. You've used Signal a lot. Something here does not add up. Either Mike Waltz is totally lying or Signal was compromised by the CIA. One or the other. Which is it?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, keep in mind, so there's a few things to this story that need to be taken care of, because the media and the Democrats are taking this and blowing everything up and using terms that, frankly, with all due respect, they have no right to, I mean, they have no understanding of. When they throw out words like war plan, classified, those might be words to them, but they actually have meaning, right? So there are operational plans, we call them O plans. They're sensitive, classified, or confidential, secret, top secret. The first thing that we got to get out of the way is that clearly, from what John Radcliffe, the CIA director, said yesterday, Signal is an authorized platform. The second issue is what was being discussed. Was it classified or not? I trust the folks, you know, the CIA director, the DNI director, to determine that more than a bunch of lefty media types that have no experience in this. And then the third thing is what you're talking about, Charlie, which is how does Jeffrey Goldberg get into this chat? Now, Mike Waltz, as you said or alluded to, has admitted he went on Laura Ingraham last night and said, I'm the guy who created this group chat. But how did he get in his phone book, right? And that's where I think the big issue is that Walt said last night, I don't know. Now, here's the deal. When I first met Jeffrey Goldberg, I called to yell at him in the 2016-2017 transition because his publication had this gadfly, horrible person named Julia Offey who wrote a disgusting and despicable story about Ivanka Trump, and I called to yell at him and said, hey, I know we've never met, blah, 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 blah. So he's in my phone. So I went to Signal, and I said, okay, let me kind of recreate this. How would he? Signal imports all of your contacts that are in your phone to the thing. So one has to assume either Mike Waltz, and by the way, Jeffrey Goldberg admits that he's only met Waltz maybe once, maybe twice several years ago. And that's Washington for you. Hey, I was at an event, we were at a forum, we crossed paths. But how did his number end up in his phone book? Because Waltz says, I don't know, I've never talked to him. That's the question that I think is important here. Because there's a lot of theories. Like, you think about this. The U.S. trade rep is Jamison Greer, JG. So if you're looking down initials in your phone book, you mistakenly get the wrong JG, not Jeffrey Goldberg, Jamison Greer. Bring him in. Okay. But how did he end up in the phone book in the first place, in his list of contacts? And that's where I think the Waltz team is saying, hey, we're asking the tech folks to look at this, because you're right. At some point, this is going to come out, right? It's, did you personally add him in, or did somebody else do it? But there's only two ways that can happen.
Right. And so other than that, or something even more nefarious happened, like the intel agencies hacked this group chat, which is a very low probability. But let's just play some of the statements from Mike Waltz, his denials. I mean, outright denials, saying that Waltz claims a staffer did not put his contact in. Let's play cut 232.
So your staffer did not put his contact information.
No,
but how did it end up in your phone?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out.
Okay, but that's a pretty big problem.
That is what we've got the best technical minds, right?
That's disturbing.
And that's where, I mean, I'm sure everybody out there has had a contact where it was said one person and then a different phone number.
But you've never talked to him before, so how's the number on your phone? I mean, I'm not an expert in any of this, but it's just curious. How's the number on your phone?
Well, if you have somebody else's contact and then then somehow it gets
someone
sucked
sent
in,
you that
it gets
contact.
sucked in.
Was there someone else supposed to be on the chat that wasn't on the chat that you thought was?
So
on
the
chat?
person that I thought was on there was never on there. It was this
who
guy.
was that? What person?
Well, I'm not. Look, okay. Laura, I take responsibility. I built the group.
I mean, I'm sorry, Sean. Getting sucked in. I use Signal all the time. I have no idea what he's talking about here.
Well, that's why I thought what was weird is that, like, so I get that, like, that. So what he's alluding to is I have Charlie Kirk in my phone, but gosh, you know, instead of Charlie Kirk's phone number, I have, you know, Bob Smith, and so I'm texting you, and that seems to be what he was saying. Well, I don't get that. Right. In other words, what he was saying is, and again, I'm just speculating, but JG, Jamison Greer, the U.S. trade rep, that would make sense. OK, so what he seems to be saying is, I thought I was adding somebody to the text, and it turns out that it was Jeffrey Goldberg's number. Right. And my point is, OK, that still doesn't, you still have, like, no one goes, like, that's just, it doesn't make sense. I buy the fact that, yeah, hey, as a member of Congress, maybe his staff said, hey, we're going to upload some reporters to your phone so you can contact them before he assumed the direct. I could buy that. Like, I didn't put him in. My staff used to program my phone. Okay. But the idea that you thought you were contacting somebody else and their numbers were just transposed, I've never had that happen, right? I mean, that to me And also, just like, let's face it, Jamison Greer just happens to have a one-off phone number than Jeffrey Goldberg. This is where I hope he does get the best technical minds to look at this.
Right. And so the other thing about Signal, if you and I were to talk on Signal a lot, Sean, and then I went to go create a new message and I put S in, the people you contact the most are elevated actually in the suggested and recommended the next contacts. So in order for this to be true, somebody who added Jeffrey Goldberg, which Mike Waltz admitted he is the admin and he is the creator of the group, he must have had established contact with Jeffrey Goldberg. Had to have. And so...
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not as much of an expert on... I've used Signal, but my technical expertise is somewhat limited to on and off on most devices. That being said, again, part of this doesn't... Like, I've made mistakes. I've added people to text chains that I didn't intend to. But that's obvious. Like someone the other day was texting my wife and I, and they got the wrong Rebecca, right? So, and immediately I'm like, who are you adding to this?
Totally agree. But here's the issue, is that this wouldn't have been a scandal, whatever. It's not a scandal. If all of a sudden Mike Waltzman, like, look, we were moving too fast. I have all these old contacts in my congressional days, and I meant to add Jamison Greer, and I added Jeffrey Goldberg.
Right.
This is unbelievably embarrassing and humiliating. In the tech world, we all have this happen. I'm so sorry. I take full responsibility. But now Mike Waltz is making us speculate one of two things. Either he's a pathological liar, which I really don't want to believe. That's the option one. Or number two is that Signal is compromised and that our own intel agencies created a backdoor to be able to look at private government chats. We are literally in a binary. There is no in between.
Yeah. So look, I agree with you. So except, look, I've known Mike Waltz for a while. I think he is a man of high integrity. He served his country honorably. He's a brilliant guy when it comes to diplomacy. He's an SF guy from the Army. That's my only issue, that he chose the wrong service. That being said, to your point, I admit, I yelled at Jeffrey Goldberg once because of this despicable story. I have no problem, to say, yeah, I got the guy in my contacts and I mistakenly added him when I meant to add someone else.
No,
we
for
all
sure.
do it.
That's what I'm saying is that why not say that if that's what happened? Because then you are begging the question of
right.
Not
That's
telling the truth,
that's my
right?
point. Is that we all have people in our phone. I've got some people in my phone that, believe me, I would never because of the people I've been in contact with over the last 10 years, that I wouldn't ever want to call or contact. But, you don't delete the contact just because you hate them.
I have Gavin Newsom's phone number. I'm not going to add Gavin Newsom to our show group chat, okay?
If you did, by the way, Charlie, here's the point. If you did, you could say, God, we just did this podcast and I was coordinating with them. And so it doesn't, right, it makes sense. And so just say if that's the case. But otherwise, you're absolutely right. There's got to be an explanation about why. And here's the thing, to your second point, because I think there's got to be a third issue, which is some staffer did it. Because if you're going to break into somebody's phone, are you really going to add Jeffrey Goldberg to the chain? I mean, I've got a list of people I'd rather add to a chain if I'm snooping or doing something.
And again, I'm not saying Mike Waltz is lying. I'm saying that what the binary has been created based on his public, his public statements and his denials is one of two. And the second of which is there's some technical backdoor that the intel that is such a high threshold.
But can't you believe that some staffer at some point added?
He said that he didn't, though. He also said it wasn't my staffer either, so he was denying that as well. And that's where I'm. But Sean, he's also acting like, well, we have the best technical minds on it. He's alluding that this had a backdoor. It doesn't take a technical mind if what I'm saying.
But here's the way I look at this. I have a belief, and I haven't asked the president this, but knowing the president's his view of Jeffrey Goldberg, I think that's what pisses him off the most, that of all people that you did this to. So if you have to explain it to him, and you're talking to Donald Trump, and you say, Mr. President, here's what happened, and I don't know why, and so here's my answer. I'm going to get the best technical mind to explain. That's your way of at least being like, hey, I'm on it.
Yeah, it is dishonest, though, and that's what I don't. If that's correct. At the same time, I mean, he's going on Laura Ingraham saying, I never talked to him, never had communication. I don't know who he is. I've never had all this. I don't know how this happened. I hope I hope it's not correct that the intel agencies have the back door.